Welcome to Elizabeth's Stories. Today, we follow Dorothy Williams, a devoted mother, betrayed by her son's lavish gift to his mother-in-law. While she receives just $3, she uncovers a sinister scam, reclaims her strength, and rebuilds family bonds. Subscribe, hit the bell for weekly mysteries, and share your thoughts below. Let's start the story. The snow fell in lazy spirals outside my kitchen window, catching the glow of the Christmas lights strung across Marcus's porch across the street. Each flake seemed to mock me, dancing in the air as if to whisper, "Look at what you've lost, Dorothy." I pressed my palms against the cold glass, watching the scene unfold in my son's driveway, like a play I hadn't been invited to star in. There, under the festive shimmer, stood a sleek black BMW, its red bow gleaming like a fresh wound. Marcus, my only child, handed the keys to Linda, his mother-in-law of barely 8 months, with a smile so wide it could have lit the neighborhood. "Merry Christmas, Mom." Linda, he called, his voice thick with pride, as if he'd just handed her the moon. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles whitening. "Mom, Linda." The words stung sharp and bitter, like a splinter lodged too deep to pull out. For 35 years, I'd been Mom, the one who'd bandaged his scraped knees, paid for his college, and co-signed the loan for his first house. The one who'd stood by his side when his father Tom left us too soon, his heart giving out in the quiet of a winter night 2 years ago. And now, here I was, demoted to just Mom, while Linda, a silver-haired stranger with designer scarves and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, basked in my son's adoration. Ashley, my daughter-in-law, clapped her hands like a schoolgirl, her laughter echoing through the frosty air. "It's perfect, Linda. You deserve this," she squealed, as if a $60,000 car was a natural reward for someone who'd barely entered our lives. I turned away from the window, my chest tight with a hurt I couldn't name. The kitchen smelled of honey-glazed ham and warm rolls, the remnants of a Christmas dinner I'd spent 6 hours preparing. My feet ached, my back throbbed, and my hands were raw from scrubbing pots. But none of that mattered to them. Not to Marcus, not to Ashley, and certainly not to Linda, who'd swept into our family like a storm I hadn't seen coming. I picked up the pink plastic piggy bank Marcus had given me, shaking it until the 3 crumpled dollar bills inside rustled like dead leaves. $3. That's what my son thought I was worth. It's symbolic, Mom, he'd said earlier, his tone dripping with the patronizing patience he'd mastered since marrying Ashley. "You're always saving money, so we thought this was perfect." Perfect. I'd smiled then, nodding like the good mother I was supposed to be, swallowing the jagged edges of my disappointment. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We smile through the cracks in our hearts, pretending the scraps we're handed are enough. But they weren't enough. Not this time. I set the piggy bank on the counter, its garish pink plastic clashing with the faded Christmas cards I'd never sent. The irony wasn't lost on me. Each card cost more than my entire gift. I glanced back at the window where Linda was running her manicured fingers along the BMW's hood, her silver hair catching the light like a halo. Ashley linked arms with her, both of them, giggling over the leather interior like conspirators in a secret I wasn't privy to. Linda had appeared shortly after Tom's death, materializing at family gatherings with her polished charm and expensive perfume. Somehow, in less than a year, she'd become Mom Linda, while I, the woman who'd birthed Marcus, who'd sacrificed everything for him, was reduced to this: a piggy bank and $3. The December wind rattled the window pane, a low moan that echoed the unease curling in my gut. Something about Linda didn't add up. Her arrival had been too convenient, her integration into our family too seamless. I dismissed it at first, chalking it up to grief and loneliness. But now, watching her bask in Marcus's generosity, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. I turned back to the kitchen, my gaze landing on the mountain of dishes I'd volunteered to clean. The dishwasher hummed a steady drone that mingled with the ticking of Tom's old grandfather clock in the living room. It was his favorite piece, a relic from his father, its pendulum swinging like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I'd always found comfort in its rhythm, but tonight it felt like a countdown to something I couldn't yet name. The front door creaked open, and Ashley's voice floated through the house bright and careless. Dot were heading out to show Mom Linda her new car around town. She called, not bothering to ask if I wanted to join. It wasn't an invitation. It was an announcement, as if I were an afterthought in my own home. Marcus's voice followed, equally dismissive. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. We'll see you next week." Next week. When they needed something, no doubt. My jaw tightened as I heard their car doors slam one after another, followed by the throaty purr of the BMW's engine as it pulled out of my driveway. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the dishwasher and the clock. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a feast I'd poured my heart into, holding a child's toy that mocked everything I'd given. That's when I saw Linda's purse sitting forgotten on the counter next to my pitiful piggy bank. A black leather Kate Spade, its sleek surface gleaming under the fluorescent light. It was the kind of bag that screamed money, the kind I'd never dream of owning. My fingers twitched, a strange impulse stirring in me. She'd left it behind in her excitement over her shiny new toy, a careless mistake that felt oddly deliberate. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hands, the leather cool and smooth against my skin. I told myself I was just being helpful, ensuring nothing was missing before I returned it. But as I carried it to my bedroom, a slow smile spread across my face. The purse felt like a key, a puzzle piece I hadn't known I was looking for. I set it on my dresser, the faint scent of Linda's perfume lingering in the air, and opened it carefully as if it might bite. Inside was a treasure trove of secrets. A wallet stuffed with cash, nearly $400 in crisp bills and credit cards from every major bank, plus store cards for Nordstrom Sachs and Tiffany. A rhinestone-encased phone buzzed with notifications, each one lighting up the screen like a warning. And tucked behind her driver's license were folded papers that made my breath catch, bank statements printed just last week, showing balances with more zeros than I'd seen since Tom's life insurance payout. Linda wasn't just well off, she was loaded. The kind of wealth that made a $60,000 BMW look like pocket change. I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart pounding as I sifted through the contents. This wasn't the purse of a lonely widow seeking companionship. This was the toolkit of someone with a plan. My eyes fell on the phone again, its screen flashing with a new message, deposit confirmed. $15,000 from Sunset Investments. Another read, meeting confirmed for Thursday. Bring the Williams file. The Williams file. My family. My name. I set the phone down my hands, trembling. Linda wasn't just a charming interloper. She was a predator, and I'd been too busy grieving to notice the trap she'd set. The grandfather clock chimed in the distance, each note a reminder of the time I'd wasted. But as I stared at Linda's purse, its contents spread across my dresser. Like evidence in a crime scene, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt that had weighed me down all evening began to harden into something else resolve. I wasn't just a grieving widow or a discarded mother. I was Dorothy Williams, a woman who'd survived loss, raised a son, and kept a family together through decades of hardship. Linda thought she could waltz into my life and take what was mine. She thought I was weak, invisible, easily dismissed. She was wrong. I repacked the purse carefully, ensuring everything was exactly as I'd found it. But before I closed it, I snapped photos of the bank statements and the most incriminating messages with my phone. If Linda was playing a game, I'd just learned the rules, and I wasn't about to let her win. As I slipped into bed that night, The wind howling outside, I felt a spark I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just anger or betrayal, it was power. The kind of power that comes from seeing the truth clearly for the first time. Linda Chen had underestimated me, and that was her first mistake. Tomorrow I'd start unraveling her secrets. Tomorrow I'd show her exactly who Dorothy Williams really was. The grandfather clock in the living room told midnight, its deep chime reverberating through the empty house like a warning. I sat at my bedroom dresser, Linda's Kate Spade purse open before me, its contents spread out like clues to a puzzle I hadn't asked to solve. The silence of the night pressed against the windows, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling in the cold. My hands, still raw from scrubbing dishes, trembled slightly as I held a folded bank statement I'd found tucked behind Linda's driver's license. The numbers printed there, 6 figures with more zeros than I'd seen in years, made my pulse quicken. Linda Chen wasn't the grieving widow she'd painted herself to be. She was something else entirely, and I was beginning to suspect I'd only scratched the surface of her secrets. I'd told myself I was just being thorough, ensuring nothing was missing before I returned her purse. But the truth was sharper, more primal. The moment I'd picked up that bag, felt its expensive weight in my hands, something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just hurt or betrayal driving me. Now it was curiosity laced with a quiet fury. Linda had waltzed into my family, claimed a place that wasn't hers, and left me holding a $3 piggy bank while she drove off in a BMW. If she thought I'd stay quiet, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The purse yielded more than I'd expected. The wallet stuffed with nearly $400 in crisp bills, held credit cards from every major bank, Amex, Visa, MasterCard, along with store cards for Nordstrom, Saks, and Tiffany. Each one gleamed with the kind of privilege I'd never known, not even when Tom was alive, and we were scraping by to give Marcus everything. A rhinestone-encased phone sat beside the wallet, its screen flashing with notifications that buzzed like angry bees. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the power button. Peeking into a purse was one thing, unlocking a phone felt like crossing a line. But then I remembered the red bow on that BMW, the way Marcus had called her Mom Linda, and the line blurred into nothingness. The phone was locked, of course, but the notifications didn't need a passcode to read. Deposit confirmed $15,000 from Sunset Investments, one read. Another meeting confirmed for Thursday. Bring the Williams file. My breath caught a cold prickle running down my spine. The Williams file. My family. My life. The words stared back at me, taunting as if Linda had left them there for me to find. I scrolled through the previewed messages, careful not to touch the screen too long. Brian Chin. Mom, where are you? Call me back. Brian Chin. I'm worried. It's not like you to go silent. Brian Chin. The police are involved now. Please, Mom. Brian Chin. Her son. The one she'd never mentioned not once in all her stories about being a lonely widow searching for connection. I set the phone down, my mind racing. Linda had built an entire persona around being alone, a grieving woman who'd found solace in our family. But these messages told a different story, one of a son desperate to reach his mother, a son who cared enough to call the police when she didn't answer. Why would she hide him, and why was she collecting files on us? I turned to the bank statements, unfolding them carefully. The numbers were staggering. Her checking account alone held more than Tom's life insurance payout, the one we'd lived on for 2 years after his death. There were transactions I didn't understand, wire transfers to offshore accounts, payments to vague entities like Sunset Investments, and withdrawals that seemed to vanish into thin air. This wasn't the financial footprint of a widow living modestly. This was the ledger of someone playing a much bigger game. A soft thud outside snapped me out of my thoughts. My heart leapt, and I froze, straining to hear over the clock's relentless ticking. The wind, I told myself. just the wind. But as I glanced at the window, the shadow of a tree branch swayed against the glass, its jagged outline looking too much like a figure for comfort. I stood my knees stiff from sitting too long and crossed to the window. The street was empty, the snow undisturbed except for the tire tracks from the BMW. Still, the unease lingered, a whisper in my bones that I wasn't as alone as I thought. I returned to the dresser, my eyes falling on a small prescription bottle nestled in the purse's side pocket. The label read, Alprazolam, 0.5 mg, Linda Chen, prescribed 2 months ago for anxiety. The timing struck me 2 months ago was when Linda had started inserting herself deeper into our lives, offering to drive me to doctor's appointments, asking pointed questions about Tom's pension, even volunteering to review my insurance policies. Just want to make sure you're taken care of, honey. She'd said, her smile as smooth as polished glass. I thought she was being kind, filling the void Tom had left. Now I wondered if her anxiety wasn't about grief, but about the weight of her own lies. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Brian Chenmom, the police, called me. They said you were last seen at the Williams house. What's going on? My stomach twisted. The police. I hadn't expected them to move so quickly, but it made sense. If Brian was worried enough to file a missing person report, they'd be sniffing around soon. I needed to be careful, but I also needed answers. Who was Brian Chen? And why was Linda so determined to keep him a secret? I was about to repack the purse when the house phone rang its shrill tone, cutting through the silence like a blade. I flinched, my heart hammering as I glanced at the clock. 12:47 a.m. No one called this late unless something was wrong. I crossed to the living room, the purse clutched in one hand, and picked up the receiver with the other. Hello. My voice was steady, but my pulse wasn't. Mrs. Williams, this is Officer Patterson with the state police. His tone was clipped professional, but there was an edge to it that set my nerves on fire. I'm calling about a report we received regarding a missing person, Linda Chen. Our records show she was last seen at your address earlier today. I forced myself to breathe, keeping my voice calm. Linda Chen, I'm sorry, officer. I'm not familiar with that name. A lie, but a necessary one. I needed time to think, to piece together what I'd found before I handed anything over. There was a pause, the kind that feels like it's measuring you. Ma'am, her son Brian Chen filed the report when she didn't return home and wasn't answering her phone. She was at your home for a Christmas dinner, correct? I tightened my grip on the receiver. Her son, the one she'd never mentioned. Well, we did have a Christmas dinner today, I said carefully. But I believe she left with my son and daughter-in-law, Marcus and Ashley Williams. They were going for a drive in her new car, a BMW, a Christmas gift from my son. I let the words hang, testing the officer's reaction. A new car. Officer Patterson's tone sharpened. Can you confirm the make and model? It's a BMW. Black, I think. Expensive. I'm not much for cars, officer. I kept my voice light, grandmotherly, the kind of voice no one suspects of hiding anything. Perhaps you should contact Marcus and Ashley. They'd know more. He took down their names and promised to follow up, but before he hung up, he added, If you hear from Ms. Chen, please let us know. Her son's very concerned. I assured him I would then set the receiver down. My mind racing. Brian Chen wasn't just a name on a phone screen. He was real, worried, and close enough to Linda to involve the police. So why had she erased him from her story? I returned to the bedroom, the purse still open, like a wound. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Brian. Mom, please call me back. I'm scared. The desperation in his words was a stark contrast to the polished, calculating Linda I'd seen tonight. I wanted to believe she was a mother who'd simply drifted from her son, but the bank statements, the cryptic messages, the Williams file, they all pointed to something darker, something deliberate. I picked up the prescription bottle again, turning it over in my hands. The label was pristine, the pills untouched. If Linda was anxious enough to need medication, why hadn't she taken any? I set it down and reached for the folded papers again, my eyes scanning the fine print. One document caught my attention, a receipt for a wire transfer to an account labeled Sunset Investments. The date was 3 days ago, and the amount was $25,000. The name of the recipient was obscured, but the memo line read, Initial Consultation, Williams Estate. My blood ran cold. They weren't just after my house or Tom's pension. They were planning something bigger, something that required consultations and files. I snapped more photos with my phone, documenting every piece of evidence. The bank statements, the wire transfer receipt, the messages from Brian, they were all threads in a web I was only beginning to understand. I repacked the purse exactly as I'd found it, every card and paper in its place, but the weight of what I'd discovered stayed with me. Linda wasn't careless. She didn't forget her purse. She'd left it here deliberately, a test or a taunt, as if daring me to look. And I had. As I slid the purse back onto the kitchen counter, the grandfather clock chimed again, marking the early hours of the morning. I stood in the dark, the house silent, except for its familiar creaks and groans. But it didn't feel like my house anymore. It felt like a chessboard, and I'd just made my first move. Linda thought she was playing against a grieving widow too broken to notice the game. But I was noticing now, and I was done being a pawn. I climbed into bed, the purse's contents burned into my memory. Sleep wouldn't come easily, not with the questions swirling in my mind. Who was Brian Chen, and why was Linda hiding him? What was the Williams file, and how deep did this scheme go? And most importantly, what was Linda planning to do with the information she'd collected? The wind howled outside, carrying the promise of a storm. I closed my eyes, but not before whispering a vow to myself, Linda Chen. You've underestimated me, and that's going to cost you. The first light of dawn crept through my bedroom curtains, painting the room in shades of gray that felt too heavy for morning. I hadn't slept, not really. My mind was a storm of questions, each one sharper than the last, sparked by the secrets I'd uncovered in Linda's purse. The bank statements, the cryptic messages, the Williams file. They were pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to understand, and the picture they formed was darker than I'd ever imagined. I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of coffee gone cold in my hands, staring at the photos I'd taken of Linda's documents. The grandfather clock ticked relentlessly in the living room, its rhythm a reminder that time was slipping away, and I needed to move faster than Linda's carefully laid plans. I opened my phone and scrolled through the images again, zooming in on the bank statement. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of thousands in her checking account, with transactions that didn't add up. Wire transfers to shadowy entities, like Sunset Investments, withdrawals to untraceable accounts, and deposits that seemed to appear out of nowhere. This wasn't the financial life of a grieving widow. This was the ledger of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, someone who'd been playing this game for years. My eyes lingered on the memo line from the wire transfer receipt, Initial Consultation, Williams Estate. My home, my life. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. Linda wasn't just after a quick score. She was orchestrating something far bigger, something that had my family's name written all over it. I set the phone down and paced the kitchen, my bare feet cold against the linoleum. The house felt different now, like a stage where a performance I hadn't rehearsed for was unfolding. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows carried a whisper of warning. I'd spent 2 years grieving Tom, keeping this house as a shrine to our life together, but now it felt like a target. Linda had been in my home at my table smiling her polished smile while she plotted. The thought made my skin crawl, but it also lit a fire in me, a fire I hadn't felt since the days when I was a nurse, handling emergencies with a calm that surprised even me. I needed more information, and I needed it fast. Linda's phone had given me a starting point, but it was her locked screen that haunted me. Those messages from Brian Chen, her son, were a loose thread in her carefully woven tapestry of lies. Why had she hidden him? And what was the Williams file? I grabbed my laptop, an old thing Tom had insisted on upgrading before he passed, and opened a browser. My fingers hesitated over the keys. I wasn't a detective, but I'd spent 40 years piecing together medical charts, spotting patterns and symptoms that others missed. This wasn't so different. I typed Brian Chen's Seattle into the search bar and held my breath. The results were immediate and overwhelming. Brian Chen was no mystery. He was a prominent attorney in Seattle, specializing in elder law and estate planning. His LinkedIn profile was polished, his photo showing a man in his late 30s, with kind eyes and a serious demeanor. His website boasted awards for prosecuting financial crimes, particularly elder fraud. Elder fraud. The words sent a chill through me. Linda's son was an expert in the very crimes I suspected she was committing. The irony was almost too much. But it also raised a question. Did Brian know what his mother was doing, or was he as much in the dark as I'd been? I clicked through his social media, my heart pounding as I found photos of him with Linda. Recent photos, family dinners, birthday celebrations, holidays. In one, Linda stood between Brian and two young children, her smile radiant, her arms around them like a devoted mother and grandmother. This wasn't the lonely widow she'd presented to us. This was a woman with a family, a life, a son who clearly adored her. So why was she here inserting herself into my family, pretending to be alone? I dug deeper, my nurse's instinct for patterns kicking in. Brian's posts mentioned his mother frequently mom's visiting next month. Can't wait for her famous lasagna. Family dinner with mom and the kids. Mom's advice on the Peterson case saved the day. The Peterson case. I opened a new tab and searched it on impulse. The results painted a grim picture, a complex elder fraud investigation Brian had worked on involving an elderly woman defrauded by trusted friends who'd manipulated her into signing over her assets. The parallels were uncanny. My hands went cold as I read article after article about Brian's work financial abuse, awareness protecting seniors from exploitation, warning signs of scams disguised as kindness. Either this was the most incredible coincidence, or Linda was running a playbook straight out of her son's nightmares. I leaned back in my chair, my coffee forgotten. Linda had been in our lives for 8 months, but her presence felt like a carefully choreographed dance. She'd appeared at Tom's funeral, a stranger offering condolences with just the right amount of warmth. She'd shown up at Ashley's birthday party, then Marcus's anniversary dinner, always with a gift, a story, a smile that disarmed. I thought she was filling a void, but now I saw her for what she was, a predator studying her prey. And I'd been too busy grieving to notice. I returned to my phone, pulling up the photos I'd taken of Linda's purse. There was one image I hadn't examined closely, yet a screenshot she'd saved tucked away in her gallery. I opened it, my breath catching, as I realized what it was: a photo of Tom's death certificate. Another showed our marriage license. A third was a snapshot of property records for this house, listing its estimated value at $450,000. My stomach dropped as I scrolled further, finding a picture that made my blood run cold, my Social Security card kept in a locked jewelry box upstairs. The timestamp was 6 months ago, long before Linda had become Mom Linda. She'd been in my bedroom, rifling through my private things, documenting my life while I cooked her dinner and welcomed her into my home. This wasn't a casual scam. This was surveillance, meticulous and cold. Linda had been building a dossier on me on us for months. The question was why and what she planned to do with it. I stood my legs unsteady and crossed to the window. The snow had stopped leaving the world outside eerily still, as if holding its breath. I felt exposed like the house itself was watching me, its walls hiding secrets I'd never thought to look for. I turned back to the laptop, my resolve hardening. Linda thought she was playing chess with a pawn. She was about to learn I was a queen. I spent the next hour digging deeper, cross-referencing every detail I could find. Sunset Investments. The name from her bank statement led to a dead end, a generic website with stock photos and vague promises of wealth management solutions. No contact information, no client testimonials, just a shell that screamed fraud. I searched for Linda Chen herself, but her digital footprint was suspiciously sparse. A few old social media posts, carefully curated, showed her at charity events or posing with generic landscapes. Nothing personal, nothing real. It was as if she'd erased herself from the world, leaving only the polished facade she wanted us to see. The house phone rang again, jarring me from my thoughts. I glanced at the clock, 6:23 a.m. Too early for Marcus or Ashley, too late for the police. I let it ring, my heart pounding as I watched the caller ID, unknown number. It stopped after 5 rings, then started again. I hesitated, then picked up my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. "Hello, Dorothy, darling. It's Linda." Her voice was honey-sweet, but there was an edge to it like a blade wrapped in silk. "I'm so sorry to call so early, but I realized I left my purse at your house last night. I hope it's not too much trouble." I froze, my eyes darting to the purse on the counter. She knew. Or she suspected. "No trouble at all, Linda," I said, matching her tone with a warmth I didn't feel. "I found it last night and kept it safe for you." "You must have been so excited about your new car." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, you're a lifesaver, Dot. I'll swing by later to pick it up. Say around noon Marcus and Ashley are coming with me. We'd love to chat about the holidays." My grip tightened on the receiver. Marcus and Ashley. She was bringing them closing ranks, making sure I didn't have time to think. "That sounds lovely," I said, my mind racing. "I'll have coffee ready. Perfect. See you then." She hung up, and I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. Noon. 5 hours to prepare. 5 hours to decide how much I'd reveal, how much I'd hide. Linda wasn't just coming for her purse. She was coming to test me to see if I'd looked inside to gauge how much I knew. I set the phone down and returned to my laptop, my fingers flying over the keys. I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof. I printed the photos from my phone, spreading them across the table, like evidence in a courtroom. The death certificate, the marriage license, the property records, my social security card. They were a map of Linda's intentions, and I was starting to read it clearly. She wasn't just after money. She was after everything: my home, my savings, my legacy. The house, worth $450,000, was the centerpiece, but Tom's pension and the insurance money added up to nearly $750,000. Enough to make her months of manipulation worthwhile. Enough to make her think she could get away with it. I leaned back, my coffee stone cold now, and let the truth settle over me like a shroud. Linda Chen was a professional con artist, and I'd been her mark from the moment she'd walked into Tom's funeral. But she'd made one critical mistake: she'd underestimated me. She thought I was a grieving widow, too broken to notice the net closing around me. But I was noticing now, and I was done playing her game. I stood my knees steadier than they'd been all night and walked to the window. The morning sun glinted off the snow, casting long shadows that seemed to point toward answers I hadn't yet found. Linda would be here in a few hours with Marcus and Ashley in tow, expecting me to be the same compliant, heartbroken woman she'd manipulated for months. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was Dorothy Williams, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. I gathered the printed photos and tucked them into a locked drawer, then carefully repositioned the purse exactly as I'd found it. Let her think she was still in control. Let her think I was clueless. I'd play her game for now, but I was writing the rules. As I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the grandfather clock chimed 7 each note, a call to action. Linda Chen had walked into my life thinking she could steal it. She was about to learn that some things and some people weren't so easily taken. The kitchen clock ticked toward noon each second, a hammer strike against my nerves. I stood at the counter arranging coffee mugs with a precision that belied the storm raging inside me. Linda's purse sat where I'd left it, a silent sentinel next to my $3 piggy bank. Its pink plastic, a mocking reminder of the betrayal that had brought me to this moment. The photos I'd taken of her documents, bank statements, wire transfers. My social security card were locked in my desk drawer, but their weight pressed against my chest. Linda was coming with Marcus and Ashley in tow, and I knew this wasn't just about retrieving her purse. It was a chess move in a game I was only beginning to understand. But I was ready to play. The morning had been a blur of preparation. I'd rehearsed my words, practiced the smile I'd wear when Linda walked through my door, all warmth and innocence to mask the fire burning in my veins. I'd spent 40 years as a nurse reading people's faces for signs of pain or deception, and I knew how to hide my own truths. Linda thought she was dealing with a grieving widow too broken to fight back. She was about to learn that Dorothy Williams was no one's pawn. The doorbell chimed sharp and intrusive, and I smoothed my sweater before opening the door. Linda stood there, her silver hair gleaming in the winter sunlight, her smile as polished as ever. Marcus and Ashley flanked her, their faces a mix of guilt and defiance, like children caught in a lie, but too stubborn to admit it. "Dorothy, darling Linda," said her voice dripping with honey as she stepped inside her expensive perfume, trailing like a ghost. "You're a saint for keeping my purse safe. I was so careless last night. No trouble at all." I replied, my smile as bright as hers, but twice as sharp. "Come in, all of you. Coffee's ready." I gestured to the kitchen table, where I'd set out mugs, a plate of cookies, and the illusion of normalcy. Marcus avoided my eyes, his shoulders hunched while Ashley twisted her wedding ring, a nervous tic I'd noticed years ago. They sat the air between us, thick with unspoken truths. Linda picked up her purse, her fingers lingering on the leather, as if checking for tampering. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, but I kept my expression soft, grandmotherly, the kind of face no one suspects of digging through secrets. "I hope you enjoyed your drive last night," I said, pouring coffee. "That BMW must be a dream to ride in." "Oh, it's divine." Linda gushed her performance Oscar-worthy. "Marcus is such a thoughtful boy. You raised him well." The way she said boy, as if my 35-year-old son were a child she'd molded, made my skin crawl. I caught Marcus wincing just slightly, but he said nothing, his gaze fixed on his coffee mug. "Speaking of thoughtful," I said, my voice light, but pointed I got a call from the state police last night. Something about a missing person report. "For you, Linda." I watched her closely, noting the way her smile froze just for a fraction of a second before melting back into place. "Missing?" She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated like broken glass. "That's ridiculous. I'm right here, obviously. Must be some mix-up." "That's what I told Officer Patterson," I said, stirring sugar into my coffee with deliberate slowness. "Apparently, your son Brian filed the report. He was worried sick when you didn't answer your phone." The room went still. Linda's hand paused mid-air, her coffee mug halfway to her lips. Marcus and Ashley exchanged a glance, their confusion palpable. "Your son, Ashley. asked her voice tinged with surprise. Linda, you never mentioned having children. Linda's eyes darted between us, calculating like a predator cornered, but not yet defeated. Oh, well, yes, she said, waving a hand dismissively. Brian lives in Seattle. We're not very close. Different lives, you know how it is. Her smile was back, but it was strained now, a crack in her perfect facade. I leaned forward, my tone gentle but unyielding. How wonderful that you have family, Linda. And they care enough to worry when you don't come home. That's precious. I let the words hang, watching her squirm under their weight. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tightening around his mug. Ashley's hand was practically welded to her wedding ring, now a telltale sign she was hiding something. Mom, we should get going, Marcus said abruptly, his voice tight. Early morning tomorrow. Of course, sweetheart, I said, my smile unwavering. But before you go, I'm curious about something. That BMW, it's a beautiful gift. I'm just wondering how you managed it. $60,000 is a lot of money even for someone with your new promotion. The air thickened heavy with the weight of my question. Marcus's face flushed red, and Ashley's hand froze on her ring. Linda's eyes narrowed just for a moment before she jumped in, her voice smooth as silk. Oh, Dorothy, Marcus has been doing so well at work. Haven't you? Dear Marcus nodded, but it was mechanical like a puppet on strings. Yeah, Mom. I got a promotion a few months ago. Regional sales manager. That's interesting, I said, tilting my head. Because I ran into your old boss, Jim Henderson, at the grocery store last week. He mentioned budget cuts at your company. Said they'd had to let people go. He was worried about you. Marcus went still, his eyes darting to Ashley, who looked like she'd swallowed glass. Linda's smile didn't waver, but her knuckles whitened around her mug. Jim doesn't know about internal promotions, Marcus said finally, his voice flat. It's complicated. I'm sure it is. I said, my tone soft, but laced with steel. But a $60,000 car isn't exactly pocket change. And then there's the second mortgage you took out on your house. $70,000, wasn't it? Approved in October, right around the time Linda started getting so helpful. The silence was deafening, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock. Marcus's face drained of color, and Ashley's eyes filled with tears. Linda leaned forward, her voice low and soothing. Dorothy, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Marcus and Ashley are just trying to secure their future, and mine, well, I'm just a friend offering advice. Advice, I repeated, my eyes locked on hers. Like the advice you gave when you offered to review my insurance policies, or when you asked about Tom's pension, or when you were in my bedroom photographing my Social Security card. I let the last words drop like a stone, watching her reaction. Linda's composure cracked, her eyes widening for a split second before she recovered. Dorothy, I don't know what you're talking about. I would never. Mom, stop. Marcus interrupted, his voice breaking. He ran a hand through his hair, looking older than his years. She's right. We're in trouble. Ashley lost her job 6 months ago. We're behind on the mortgage, behind on everything. I bought Linda that car because she said she could help us fix this mess. The confession hung in the air, raw and jagged. Ashley sobbed quietly, her hands covering her face. Linda's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. I leaned back, my heart aching for my son, but burning with anger at the woman who'd manipulated him. What exactly did she promise you, Marcus? I asked, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the table. She said her investment group required a demonstration of good faith, something to show we were serious. The car was supposed to prove we could handle big financial decisions. She said they'd review our situation, consolidate our debts, set up new portfolios, help us start over. And you believed her. I asked not unkindly. You believed a woman who's been lying about her son, her life, her everything. Marcus looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom. I was drowning. Ashley was talking about divorce. The kids were asking why we couldn't afford their school trips. I was working 70-hour weeks just to keep us afloat. When Linda offered a way out, I grabbed it. I wanted to reach for him to pull him into my arms like I had when he was a boy, but the piggy bank on the counter stopped me. $3. That's what he'd thought I was worth. So you decided to throw your mother overboard to save yourself, I said quietly. That's not how she presented it. Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. She said it was a win-win. You'd get better returns on your investments. We'd get help with our debts, and everyone would be better off, except I'd have to sell my house. I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm, and rent it back from her so-called investment group. Did she tell you that part, Marcus? Did she tell you she's been photographing my personal documents for months? My social security card, Tom's death certificate, our marriage license. Marcus's face went white. What? No, she didn't. She said you were talking about downsizing, that the house was too much for you to maintain alone. I never said any such thing. I snapped, my patience fraying. This house is where your father and I built our life. It's where you took your first steps, where we celebrated every holiday. It's where I plan to stay until they carry me out. Linda stood her chair scraping against the floor. Dorothy, this is getting out of hand. I think we're all a bit emotional after the holidays. Let's take a step back. Sit down, Linda, I said, my voice low and commanding. She froze, her eyes narrowing, but she obeyed, sinking back into her chair. You don't get to dismiss this. Not after you've been playing my family like pieces on a board. Mom, Marcus said, his voice trembling. What are you saying? I'm saying Linda Chen is a professional con artist. I said, my gaze never leaving her. She's been watching us since your father's funeral, studying our vulnerabilities, building a file on our finances. She knew you were struggling before you did, Marcus, and she used that to pull you into her scheme. That's absurd, Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I've only ever tried to help this family. Help. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet kitchen. Is that what you call forging a power of attorney document, giving Marcus control over my finances without my consent, ordering an appraisal of my house behind my back? Marcus's head snapped up. What power of attorney document? I pulled a printed copy from my pocket, the one I'd found online after checking county records this morning. This one, I said, sliding it across the table. Filed 3 weeks ago with the county clerk. It's got my signature or a very good forgery of it. Care to explain? Linda, her face paled, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Marcus stared at the document, his hands shaking. Mom, I swear I didn't know about this. I believe you. I said, my voice softening for him, but not for her. But Linda did. She's been planning this for months, Marcus. The car, the investment talk, the help she's been offering. It's all part of a long game to take everything I have. Ashley was crying openly now, her voice choked. Dorothy, I'm so sorry. We didn't know it was this bad. Linda said she said you'd be taken care of, that this was about securing everyone's future. Secure, I repeated, my eyes locked on Linda's. Is that what you call photographing my social security card, or appraising my house without my knowledge, or convincing my son to go into debt to buy you a car? You didn't need Linda's composure, shattered, her hands trembling as she stood again. This is slander. Dorothy, you have no proof I have more than you think, I said, cutting her off. I have photos of your bank statements, your wire transfers, your messages about the Williams file. I have a recording of our conversation last night when you called to check if I'd looked in your purse. And I have a very good lawyer who's very interested in forged documents. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Linda's eyes darted to the door, as if calculating her escape, but she stayed put, her shoulders sagging. Marcus buried his face in his hands, his voice muffled. God, Mom, what have I done? I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but the truth was messier. He'd been desperate, yes, but he'd also been complicit, willing to trade my trust for a promise of salvation. You made a mistake, Marcus, I said finally. But it's not too late to fix it. The question is whether you're ready to face the truth about Linda and about yourself. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I didn't know, Mom. I thought she was helping us. I thought you could buy your way out of trouble. I said, my voice gentle but firm. But you can't buy trust, Marcus. And you can't buy family. Linda stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I think we're done here, she said, her voice cold now, all pretense gone. I'll see myself out. No, you won't, I said, stepping between her and the door. You're not walking away from this, Linda. Not until we settle what you've done to my family. She stared at me, her eyes hard. But I saw something else there. Fear. For the first time since she'd walked into my life, Linda Chen was afraid, and I wasn't about to let her forget it. The kitchen was silent after Linda's abrupt departure, the air heavy with the wreckage of our confrontation. Marcus sat slumped at the table, his face buried in his hands, while Ashley's quiet sobs filled the space where words should have been. The grandfather clock ticked on its steady rhythm, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in my heart. I stood by the counter, the pink piggy bank mocking me with its emptiness, but I felt something new stirring inside, a fire fierce and unyielding that Linda's betrayal had ignited. She thought she could play me, manipulate my family, and walk away unscathed. But I was done being her victim. It was time to turn the tables. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Marcus. I said, my voice firm, but not unkind. Look at me. He raised his head, his eyes red and haunted. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't think I know. I said, cutting him off gently. You were desperate, and Linda used that. But we're not done yet. She's still out there thinking she's won. We're going to prove her wrong. Ashley wiped her tears, her voice trembling. What can we do? Dorothy, she's got everything, money connections, that car. We're drowning in debt, and now this. This document. She gestured to the forged power of attorney paper, still lying on the table, its ink a silent accusation. We fight smart. I said, my nurse's instinct for precision kicking in. Linda thinks she's dealing with a grieving widow and a struggling couple. She doesn't expect us to fight back. That's our advantage. I leaned forward, my hands braced on the table. But I need you both with me. No more secrets, no more lies. Can you do that? Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. Anything, Mom. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Ashley reached for his hand, her eyes meeting mine. Me too. I didn't see her for what she was. I'm in. Good, I said, feeling a spark of hope amidst the ashes of betrayal. Because Linda's not just after me. She's after you too, your money, your future. We're going to beat her at her own game. I pulled out my phone, opening the photos I'd taken of Linda's documents. The bank statements, the wire transfer receipts, the messages about the Williams file. They were my ammunition, but I needed more. Linda was a professional, her moves calculated and concealed. If I was going to trap her, I needed to think like her, cunning, meticulous, and one step ahead. First, I said, we need to know exactly what she's planning. Marcus, you said she mentioned an investment group. What else did she tell you? He rubbed his face, his voice low. She said her group, Sunset Investments, specializes in helping families like ours, people with debt, people who need a fresh start. She said they'd consolidate our loans, set up high-yield accounts. even help you manage the house so you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance. All we had to do was show commitment. That's why I bought the car. She said it was a gesture of trust. A gesture of trust, I repeated, my tone dripping with disdain. And the second mortgage, was that her idea too? He nodded shame, coloring his cheeks. She said it would show the investors we were serious, that we could handle big financial moves. She had papers ready contacts at the bank. She made it sound so easy. I clenched my fists, anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. Linda hadn't just manipulated their desperation. She'd orchestrated it, pushing them deeper into debt to make them more dependent on her. And the power of attorney, I asked, pointing to the forged document. Did she ever mention anything about controlling my finances? Marcus shook his head, his eyes wide. No, Mom. I swear I had no idea about that. She never said anything about you signing anything. I believed him, but the sting of his complicity lingered. I turned to Ashley. What about you? Did she ever ask you to do anything unusual, like get me to sign something or talk about my finances? Ashley hesitated, her fingers twisting her wedding ring. She asked me to convince you to meet with her financial advisor. She said it was for your benefit to secure your future. I thought she was being kind. Kind, I said, the word bitter on my tongue. Linda doesn't do kind. She does control. I pulled up the photo of the wire transfer receipt, $25,000, to Sunset Investments dated 3 days ago. This is her game. She's moving money, building a paper trail, and setting us up to lose everything. But we're going to turn it around. I outlined my plan, my voice steady as I laid out each step. Linda thinks she's dealing with a family too broken to fight back. We're going to let her believe that for now. We'll play along, make her think we're still under her spell. But behind the scenes, we're gathering evidence to expose her. Marcus frowned, his brow furrowing. Evidence like what, Mom? You've got photos, but is that enough? Not yet, I admitted. That's why we're going to bait her. Linda's greedy. She's after my house, Tom's pension, everything. If we make her think there's even more to gain, she'll get careless. And when she does, we'll have her. I pulled a notepad from the drawer and started sketching out the trap. Step 1. I'm going to create a fake document, an investment portfolio showing I have more assets than she thinks. Not just the house and the pension, but a fictional trust worth $2 million. Something irresistible to someone like her. Ashley's eyes widened. You can do that. I can make it look real enough, I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. I spent years handling medical records, forging signatures for doctors too busy to sign their own charts. A fake portfolio won't be hard. I'll use some of Tom's old investment templates and dress them up with enough jargon to fool her. Marcus leaned forward, a spark of hope in his eyes. And then what? Then we invite her to a meeting, I said. We tell her I'm considering her investment group, but only if she brings her partners to discuss the terms. She won't have partners. Sunset Investments is a front, I'm sure of it. When she scrambles to cover her tracks, we'll be ready with questions she can't answer. And evidence, Ashley added, catching on. You said you recorded her last night. Can we get more? Exactly, I said. I'll record every conversation from now on. My phone has a voice memo app, and I'll keep it running whenever she's around. If she slips up, we'll have it on tape. Marcus hesitated, his voice low. What about the police? Shouldn't we just turn over what you have? Now I shook my head. Not yet. The photos and the forged document are suspicious, but they're not enough for a conviction. Linda's smart. She'll have a story ready, maybe even a lawyer. We need her to incriminate herself, to admit what she's done. That's why we need her to think she's winning. I turned to my laptop, pulling up Brian Chen's website again. His face stared back at me, serious and kind, a stark contrast to his mother's polished deceit. There's one more piece to this, I said. Brian Chen, Linda's son. He's an attorney specializing in elder fraud. If anyone can help us nail her, it's him. But we need to be careful. He's her son, and blood runs thick. Ashley frowned. You think he's involved? I don't know, I admitted. His messages sounded desperate, like he genuinely didn't know where she was. But we can't assume he's innocent. I'll reach out to his office, feel him out. If he's clean, he could be an ally. If not, we'll know more about what we're up against. I spent the next hour crafting the fake portfolio, pulling numbers and jargon from Tom's old investment files. I made it convincing $2 million in a trust fund tied to a fictional inheritance from a distant relative. I printed it on heavy bond paper, using Tom's old letterhead to give it an air of legitimacy. Every detail was meticulous, from the account numbers to the fine print designed to lure Linda into overreaching. As I worked, Marcus and Ashley watched their earlier guilt giving way to determination. What do you need us to do? Mom, Marcus asked, his voice steadier now. You're going to play your part, I said. Act like you're still on board with Linda's plan. Tell her I'm softening, that I'm considering her investment group, but need to meet her partners first. Feed her ego. She'll think she's got us right where she wants us. Ashley nodded, her jaw set. I can do that. I'll tell her I've been talking to you, convincing you to trust her. Good, I said. And Marcus, you need to act like you're still desperate, still willing to do whatever she says. If she thinks you're her puppet, she'll let her guard down. He winced, but nodded. I can do that. I owe you that much. You owe yourself, I corrected, my voice softening. You made a mistake, Marcus. But you're my son. We're family, and family fights together. His eyes glistened, and he reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. I don't deserve you, Mom. You don't, I said, with a small smile squeezing back. But you've got me anyway. I turned to the phone, pulling up Brian Chen's office number from his website. My fingers hovered over the keypad, a flicker of doubt creeping in. What if he was part of Linda's scheme? What if I was walking into another trap? But I pushed the thought aside. I'd spent too long doubting myself, letting grief and betrayal cloud my judgment. I was done being afraid. The call connected on the second ring. Chen Law Offices. This is Sarah. A cheerful voice answered. Hi, Sarah, I said, keeping my tone professional. My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm calling about a potential case involving elder fraud. I'd like to speak with Mr. Chen directly, if possible. There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice brightened. Mr. Chen's in a meeting, but I can schedule a consultation. Can you tell me a bit about the case? It's sensitive, I said, choosing my words carefully. It involves forged documents and financial manipulation, targeting a senior citizen, me. I have evidence, but I need someone with expertise in this area. Sarah's tone shifted more serious now. I understand, Mrs. Williams. I'll pass this along to Mr. Chen personally. He's very passionate about these cases. Can you come by the office tomorrow? Tomorrow works, I said, my heart racing. Thank you. As I hung up, I felt a surge of adrenaline. Brian Chen was a wild card, but he was also a potential ally. If he was as dedicated to fighting elder fraud as his website claimed, he might be the key to bringing Linda down. If not, I'd know soon enough. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of preparation. I set up my phone to record, automatically testing it to ensure the audio was clear. I coached Marcus and Ashley on their roles, drilling them on what to say to Linda to keep her off guard. Every detail mattered, every word, every glance. Linda was a professional, but so was I. I'd spent decades keeping patients alive under pressure. I could handle one con artist. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the kitchen, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The hurt and betrayal that had weighed me down were still there, but they were fuel now, driving me forward. Linda had underestimated me, thinking my grief and age made me weak. But I was Dorothy Williams, and I was done playing her game. I was writing the rules now, and I was going to win. I looked at Marcus and Ashley, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. "Tomorrow we start," I said. "We play her game, but we play it better. She's going to think she's got us right until the moment she realizes she's lost." Marcus nodded his eyes, meeting mine with a spark of the boy I'd raised. "We're with you, Mom." I smiled, a real one this time, and felt the weight of the past lift just a little. Linda Chen had tried to break my family, but she'd only made us stronger. And when the time came, I'd make sure she paid for every lie she'd told. The air in Linda's pristine living room was thick with tension, the kind that hums like a taut wire ready to snap. I sat on her cream-colored sofa, my hands folded calmly in my lap, the fake portfolio, $2 million in fictional assets, tucked in a leather folder beside me. Marcus and Ashley sat to my left, their faces carefully schooled into expressions of eager compliance, though I could see the strain in their eyes. Linda stood across from us, her silver hair catching the light from a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. She was all smiles, her voice as smooth as ever, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes, a crack in her polished facade. She thought she was still in control. She was wrong. "Thank you for coming," Dorothy Linda said, her tone dripping with warmth as she poured tea from a delicate porcelain pot. "I'm so glad you're considering our investment group. Sunset Investments is thrilled to help secure your future. And Marcus and Ashley's, of course." She glanced at them, her smile tightening as if testing their loyalty. I nodded my own smile just as practiced. "I've been thinking about what you said, Linda, about planning for the future, taking care of my family. That portfolio you mentioned, it sounds promising. I brought something to show you." I slid the leather folder across the glass coffee table, its weight a silent challenge. "My financial advisor helped me put this together. I think you'll find it interesting." Linda's eyes lit up a predator catching the scent of prey. She opened the folder, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times. Her smile widened as she scanned the fake documents. Charts, account statements, a trust fund I'd invented from thin air. "Dorothy, this is impressive," she said, her voice almost purring. "A $2 million trust. I had no idea you were sitting on such wealth. I keep my cards close." I said, my tone light, but my eyes locked on hers. Tom always said to plan for a rainy day. "I want to make sure my family's taking care of Marcus, Ashley, my grandkids. You understand, don't you?" "Of course." Linda said, her gaze flicking to Marcus and Ashley, who nodded eagerly, playing their parts perfectly. "That's why we're here. My partners at Sunset Investments can ensure this wealth grows, not just for you, but for generations." "Your partners?" I said, tilting my head. "I'd love to meet them. You've spoken so highly of them, but I'd feel better discussing the details in person. Can they join us today?" The room went still, the only sound the faint tick of a clock on the mantel. Linda's smile faltered just for a moment before she recovered. "My partners are very busy," she said, her voice smooth but strained. "They're based overseas handling international accounts, but I'm fully authorized to represent them." "Overseas," I repeated, my tone curious, almost innocent. "That's interesting. Sunset Investments doesn't seem to have much of an online presence." I looked them up. Nothing but a basic website, no office address, no client reviews. Odd for a group handling millions. Don't you think Linda's fingers tightened around the portfolio, her knuckles whitening? "We value discretion," she said, her voice a touch sharper now. "Our clients prefer privacy." "I'm sure they do," I said, leaning forward. "But I'm a careful woman, Linda. I don't hand over $2 million without knowing who I'm dealing with. Surely your partners can make time for a potential investor like me. Or is there something you're not telling us? Marcus shifted beside me, his voice hesitant but imperfectly timed. Yeah, Linda. You said your group was top tier. Mom's offering a lot of money. Why can't we meet them? Linda's eyes darted between us, her composure fraying like cheap fabric. It's not that simple, she said, forcing a laugh. These things take time to arrange. Let's focus on the portfolio for now. No, I said, my voice cutting through hers like a blade. Let's focus on the truth, Linda. Like the truth about the forged power of attorney document giving Marcus control over my finances. Or the appraisal you ordered on my house without my consent. Or the photos you took of my social security card, my marriage license, my husband's death certificate. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Linda's face went pale, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Marcus and Ashley stared at her, their feigned compliance replaced by raw anger. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, setting it on the table. The voice memo app was running its red light, a silent accusation. I've been recording our conversations, Linda, I said. Every word since you called about your purse. And I've got photos, your bank statements, your wire transfers to Sunset Investments, your messages about the Williams file. Care to explain? Linda stood her chair, scraping against the hardwood floor. This is outrageous, she snapped, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. You've been spying on me, Dorothy. After all I've done for your family, all you've done, I said, rising to meet her, my voice steady and cold. You've lied, manipulated, and tried to steal everything I have. You preyed on my son's desperation, convinced him to buy you a $60,000 car while he was drowning in debt. You forged documents to control my finances. You thought you could walk into my life and take it all. Mom, is this true? Marcus asked, his voice breaking, as he stood, his eyes locked on Linda. Did you forge that document? Did you use us? Linda's gaze darted to the door, her hands clenching into fists. You don't understand, she said, her voice low now, almost pleading. I was trying to help. Your mother's finances, your debts. It's all connected. I was building a plan to save you all. Save us, Ashley said, her voice rising as she stood beside Marcus. You pushed us into a second mortgage. You told us it was for our future, but it was for you. I took a step closer, my eyes never leaving Linda's. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. You're going to call your son Brian Chen. You're going to tell him everything, how you forged documents, how you targeted my family, how you've been running this scam for months. And you're going to return every cent you took from Marcus and Ashley. Linda laughed, a brittle sound that cracked under the weight of her fear. You think you can threaten me? I have lawyers, Dorothy. You have nothing but accusations and a few photos. I have more than that, I said, pulling a USB drive from my purse. Copies of everything, your bank statements, your messages, the forged document, the appraisal order. And I have a meeting with Brian Chen tomorrow. He's an expert in elder fraud, isn't he? I wonder what he'll think when he sees his mother's name on these files. Linda's face crumpled, her hands trembling as she sank back into her chair. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small, stripped of her polished veneer. You don't know what you're doing, she whispered. You don't know the people I work with. Then tell me, I said, leaning in. Tell me who's behind Sunset Investments. Tell me who's pulling your strings. Because I'm not stopping until I know everything. She shook her head, her eyes glassy with panic. You don't understand. It's not just me. There are others people who don't take kindly to being crossed. Then you shouldn't have crossed me, I said, my voice steady as steel. You thought I was weak, Linda. A lonely widow, easy to manipulate. But I'm not alone. And I'm not weak. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a woman who's fought for everything she has. and I'm not letting you take it. Marcus stepped forward, his voice raw but firm. She's right, Linda. You used us, lied to us. I trusted you and you betrayed my family. Tell us the truth, or we're going to the police right now. Ashley nodded, her tears replaced by resolve. We're done being your pawns. You're going to fix this, or we'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. Linda's shoulders sagged, her fight draining away like water through a sieve. She reached for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed a number. Brian, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need you to come to my house. Now. There's something I need to tell you. I exchanged a glance with Marcus and Ashley, a silent acknowledgement that we'd done it. Linda was cornered, her lies unraveling, her empire crumbling. As she spoke to Brian, her voice cracking with every word, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The hurt, the betrayal, the fear, they were still there. But they were overshadowed by something stronger, triumph. Linda hung up, her face ashen. He's on his way, she said, her voice hollow. He'll be here in an hour. Good, I said, slipping my phone into my purse, the recording still running. And when he gets here, you're going to tell him everything. Every lie, every scheme, every victim. And you're going to start with the money you took from my son. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor, defeated. I looked at Marcus and Ashley, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. We'd won this battle, but the war wasn't over. Not until Linda faced the consequences. Not until my family was safe. I reached for Marcus's hand, squeezing it tightly, and felt Ashley's hand on my shoulder. For the first time in months, we were a unit bound not just by blood, but by a shared fight. As we waited for Brian, the clock on the mantel ticked on each second, a reminder that time was on our side now. Linda had thought she could break us, but she'd only made us stronger. And as I sat there, the fake portfolios still open on the table, I knew one thing for certain. Dorothy Williams wasn't just a survivor. She was a warrior, and this was her victory. The courtroom was quieter than I'd expected, its polished wood and muted lights, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged in my life for months. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, watching as Linda Chen stood before the judge, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face stripped of its usual polish. She looked smaller now, diminished like a shadow of the woman who'd waltzed into my family with a smile and a lie. The gavel fell, and the judge's voice echoed. 3 years for financial fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. Linda's shoulders sagged, but she didn't look back as the bailiff led her away. I felt no joy in her punishment, only a quiet relief that justice had been served. Brian Chen sat 2 rows behind me, his face a mask of grief and resolve. He'd testified against his mother, his voice steady but heavy, as he recounted her history of scams, a pattern he'd uncovered only after my call to his office. His testimony had been the final nail in Linda's coffin, detailing how she'd targeted vulnerable families across 3 states, using charm and forged documents to siphon their savings. I caught his eye as I stood to leave, and he gave me a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the strange bond we'd formed. He'd lost a mother. I'd nearly lost my family. But together, we'd stopped her. Outside the courthouse, the winter air was crisp, the snow long melted, replaced by the tentative green of early spring. Marcus and Ashley waited for me on the steps, their faces softer than they'd been in months. Emma and Jake, my grandchildren, ran to me, their laughter a balm to the wounds Linda had left. "Grandma, can we get ice cream?" Emma asked, her pigtails bouncing as she tugged my hand. "Only if you say, 'pretty please,' first," I teased, ruffling her hair. Jake giggled, mimicking his sister, and for a moment, the world felt whole again. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes searching mine. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you. For everything. for not giving up on us. I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words. You're my son, Marcus. I'd fight for you no matter what. Ashley wiped her eyes, her voice soft. We don't deserve you, Dorothy. After everything we did believing Linda letting her manipulate us. You made a mistake, I said, my voice firm but kind. But you owned it. You stood with me when it counted. That's what family does. We walked to the car, the kids chattering about school and superheroes, their voices a reminder of what I'd fought for. Marcus and Ashley had sold the BMW using the money to pay off their second mortgage. Ashley had found a new job, and Marcus was working fewer hours, prioritizing time with Emma and Jake. They'd started therapy both individually and as a couple, facing the cracks Linda had exploited in their marriage. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that was enough. Back at my house, the grandfather clock ticked steadily, its rhythm no longer a warning but a comfort. I'd made changes of my own in the months since Linda's arrest. I'd revised my will, leaving my estate to a local charity for seniors, ensuring no one could ever target it again. The house, once a target of Linda's greed, was now a sanctuary again, filled with the laughter of my grandchildren and the warmth of family dinners. That evening, as we sat around the kitchen table, Marcus handed me a small wrapped box. It's not much, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I wanted you to have something real this time. I opened it to find a framed photo, our wedding picture, me and Tom Young, and beaming, the edges worn, but the love untouched by time. Tears pricked my eyes as I traced Tom's face, remembering the man who'd built this life with me. You found this in the attic, I asked, my voice catching. Marcus nodded, his own eyes glistening. I remembered how much it meant to you. I'm sorry, Mom, for the piggy bank, for everything. I was so caught up in our problems, I forgot what really matters. I pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of the past lift just a little more. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. Ashley joined us, her arms around both of us, and the kids piled in their giggles, filling the room. For the first time in years, I felt whole, not because the pain was gone, but because we'd faced it together. Linda had tried to tear us apart, but she'd only shown us how strong we could be. A week later, I received a letter from Brian Chen, handwritten and unexpected. Dear Mrs. Williams, it began. I can't thank you enough for what you did. My mother's actions were her own, but your courage stopped her from hurting others. I've enclosed a letter I wrote to her in prison, not to forgive her, but to understand. I hope you find peace. Enclosed was a copy of his letter to Linda, a raw, honest plea for answers, for closure. I read it, then tucked it away, a reminder that even those who hurt us are human, carrying their own burdens. I wrote back to Brian, inviting him for coffee. To my surprise, he accepted, and over the next few months we became unlikely friends, bonding over shared stories of resilience and loss. He told me about his work protecting seniors, and I shared memories of Tom, of nursing, of the family I'd fought to keep. It wasn't romance. Nothing like that, just a connection born of surviving the same storm. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, Emma and Jake playing in the yard, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Linda's betrayal had been a wound deep and raw, but it had also been a mirror showing me the strength I'd forgotten I had. I'd been a nurse, a wife, a mother, but I was more than those roles. I was Dorothy Williams, a woman who'd faced a predator, and one not just for herself, but for her family. The grandfather clock chimed inside its notes, soft and steady, like a heartbeat, tying past to present. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the spring air, the love of my family, the peace of a life reclaimed. Linda had thought she could break me, but she'd only made me stronger. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold, I knew one thing for certain: I was home, and I was whole.